Remarkable careers don't just happen. They are defined by a person's culture, global culture, and the culture. It takes a bit of risk, an ability to adapt, and a lot of resilience. I'm Leila Fataar, and welcome to Cultural Voices, a series of unfiltered conversations with people shaping and representing culture and creativity. In this episode, I chat to Joy Howard, current CMO at Backmarket and former founder of the now acquired brand Early Majority. From her formative years in the all-girl indie band Sealy to major marketing roles at Patagonia, Converse, Sonos, and Lyft, Joy's journey and early start has been far from conventional. We talk about what it means to lead with empathy, navigate purpose inside corporate systems, and stay creative without losing your edge. Joy opens up about the intersection of music, activism, and her lived experience in her work, and how authenticity isn't just a marketing buzzword. Welcome, Joy Howard. Thank you so much for joining us at Cultural Voices. So excited to chat to you. We've known each other and passed each other along the way for a few years now. So I'm really excited to get under the skin of who you are and how your career path has been shaped to what I think is quite a remarkable career. I think you've worked for everyone that I would ever wanted to work for. So, we're talking Sonos, we're talking Patagonia, we're talking Nike, we're talking Coca-Cola, Lyft. We'll jump into that, but, I think this is really about you. So really wanted to get an understanding about your entire career as we chat through here. So let's start from the beginning. Let's start from Savannah, Georgia, right? Tell me about your upbringing and personal background and how that shaped you and the way you see the world today. Let's know about little Joy Howard out in Georgia.
Okay, so I was actually born in Savannah. That's true.
Yes. Yeah.
And but I grew up in a little small town near Savannah that's called Reedsville.
Okay.
And I think the thing that, I know you and I both care a lot about social justice issues, and I would say that came from really growing up in the rural South,
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in a context where there was a lot of racism.
Yeah.
But my family wasn't racist, at least, I mean, everybody has some,
Sure.
But it's like, that was a really weird thing about growing up. For me, I always had the sense that my family thought about things a little bit differently than other white families. The color line was a really big deal growing up, I'm sure it was for you too.
I mean, especially in the South as well. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, so the reason for that was that my grandfather was the warden of the Georgia State Penitentiary.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very high profile appointment back then. And there was a lot of racism in the prison system.
Mm-hmm.
And he really took a lot of pride in being a different kind of warden. But he saw a lot of injustice while he was there, a lot of racial injustice. And, there's many stories that I heard growing up about that. One was that when Martin Luther King Jr. was brought to be put in jail there, my grandfather, personally walked him to the cell and shook his hand, and photographers took a lot of photos of that. And he got into a lot of trouble, a lot of hot water for doing that. So I think that really shaped a lot of my growing up. And I guess the second big thing that really shaped me a lot, and has a lot to do with how I ended up here in Europe, is that when I was 16, I was an exchange student in what was then West Germany.
Yes.
And this was like height of the Cold War.
Right.
And, I just was like this little kid from South Georgia. You sort of adopt a lot of what you grow up in. We thought Rambo was a cool movie. German kids thought that was like the dumbest. It was like a party trick to bring me out and be like, "What do you think of Rambo?" And I'd be like, "So cool." And they'd be like, "You're so dumb."
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was like, Chernobyl happened while I was in high school there. There was a day when we couldn't go outside, because the black cloud was like, traveling across, Western Europe.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was also sort of the beginning of my environmental consciousness. So, those have been two big themes in my personal life and in my work that have followed me all the way through.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and I know you, of course, all the stuff you did for Early Majority. I mean, that was just that was your own personal way of trying to, do something quite different and bringing all that knowledge that you had from before. We'll talk about that in a bit. Um, during this sort of like early time, were there any sort of challenges or triumphs in your personal life that influenced how you approach your career? Like, how did you use those two things, social justice and environmentalism, or at least awareness of it, to shape your career? Was that in your early career path? Was that part of that thinking, or did that come later for you?
Yeah, I mean, in my very early career, basically like right out of college, it definitely did. So I
Okay.
was, my first job out of undergrad was actually working for President Carter at the
Mm,
Carter Center
mm,
in Atlanta, Georgia. He was doing a lot of work to bring democracy and democratic, procedures to the rest of the
mm.
world. So he was doing a lot of elections monitoring in Africa at the time. And so, yeah, so that was my first job basically out of college. And it was, right kind of like where I wanted to be. And I guess that's the theme for me of like knowing what I'm interested in, talking my way into getting the job, and then realizing I have absolutely nothing to offer this job because I just talked my way into it and I don't really have the relevant experience. I'm in a
I
very
mean,
different place now, thank
yeah,
goodness.
you got to start somewhere, Joy. That's what I'm telling you. You know.
And they've been very instrumental, because
Mm.
you think like, wow, I really want to do this work, it's so important. And then you get there and you realize, okay, I'm not really having an impact. Why is
Yeah.
that? And then you
Yeah.
have to kind of like,
Mm.
you can't skip a stitch, you have to go back and like retrace your steps and think
So
about, okay, what is it that I really need to be effective here? So it did impact me a lot in my early career. Same thing, when I went to business school. There's a really important part of the career in between those two steps that we should cover. But then when I got out of business school, I got a job basically working in sustainability in emerging markets. And that really brought everything together for me. That was at a time when it was, really just beginning to move beyond compliance into this idea of like we can really build sustainable
yeah.
businesses. And so, yeah, I would say there have been a couple moments where I did that, but then, realized, okay, I need to get more relevant experience to really have an impact here.
And was there a sort of like absolute moment that shifted your perspective and that career? What that was it that realization to make an impact? You had to learn something different with brands to then come back, because almost now with back market, it's almost a culmination of everything together, right? So
It
it's all
really is. I
it
mean, it
really
really is
is.
everything.
It really is. And so
Yeah,
for
it
at
really
least
is. That's why I'm having
from
so
what I
much
can
fun.
see. Yeah, totally. Because it just
Yeah.
feels like actually this is the end of all the bits that came together. But was there a sort of moment where suddenly there was like a bang, I need to do this, and it shifted? So coming out of that early environmental and emerging markets
hmm
opportunity, and then did you shift to more traditional brands there? What happened?
I did. I did. Okay, so
Okay.
I have to fill in. Okay, I have to
Yes.
kind of fill in the
Yes.
blank because
Yes.
so basically what happened was, I was really interested in politics, the environment,
Mhm.
the developing world, and I was studying that too. I went back to work on my PhD, and I got really interested in. I've always really liked music a lot. So anyway, this is kind of the weird thing that happened to me in the '90s, which is that I was in a band and my band got signed. Okay,
Wow.
so that's like while I
Amazing.
was in grad school.
Yeah.
So I dropped out of grad school and I recorded 4 albums and we toured and we did the whole thing. It was like after Nirvana, all the major labels thought they could make a lot of money by signing indie bands. And so we
Mhm.
kind of got swept up in that, right?
Amazing.
And that was just this incredible experience. Like I
Sure.
said, we recorded 4 albums. We were on the same label as PJ Harvey and Stereo
Amazing.
Lab. We toured a lot with Modest Mouse. I'm just dropping
Mhm.
some, names that
Yeah.
people may have heard of.
Yeah.
But anyway, I got eventually like the bottom fell out of the music industry in 2000, right? So it got
Mhm.
completely disrupted by
Mhm.
Napster and all that stuff. And it was clear that this was like not a viable path to making a living. Like I grounded out, most artists like us too. It was great to be signed, but we were still essentially living in poverty with no health
Sure.
insurance. I'm
Yeah.
coming up on 30 years old. It's
Yeah.
like, okay, I really need to get like health insurance and a real job.
Right.
So that
That
so
was
that's
the
when I applied to
moment when
business
you're like,
school.
yeah,
I'm like, okay,
it's healthcare.
let's just,
Let's go.
you know, it's yeah, but I think you look out at the
Yeah.
people that you really admire, and then you get close to them and you realize, wow, okay, this has been really, this is really hard. Like, I don't know if
Oh.
I am that dedicated to music, that I can do what these people have done.
Mhm.
And if that's the outcome, it's not a good outcome for me.
Mhm.
So, okay, so basically then at that time, that was like 2000, Fast Company had just like launched as a magazine.
Mhm.
And because the first wave of the dot-com boom was taking off, people were really interested in creativity and business,
Yes. Mm.
And I think I read some article about some guy doing like an improv class at Google. And I was like, man, this, out of work actor can like get a job at Google. You know what I mean? Like,
There is a way for me here forward.
yeah. And so I think like a lot of artists,
Yeah.
a lot of artists, you kind of cobble things together. You make some official money. You get the Rockstar discount when you go to restaurants and stuff like that. But anyway, we filed these tax forms in the States that are called 1040s, and my 1040 before I went to business school, of course, I got scholarships everywhere, because I had this really weird background, whatever.
Mhm.
So I didn't have to take out loans or anything, which is great.
Which is
But my
great.
1040 before I went to business school was like, I made like 10 grand, okay, a year. That's what I was
Mhm.
living on.
Mhm.
And then my first year out of business school, I made 110 grand.
Oh,
So it was like, that was kind of the shift that I needed to make in terms of like being able to save and feed myself and have health insurance and all that stuff. So first job out of business school was at Johnson & Johnson, which was like back then a very beloved brand. This was like
sure.
2002. And that's what I was working on. I was working on like new business ventures in emerging markets. Like we had this water purification technology that could like, save the lives of millions of babies. We were doing like pilots in Mexico, but I could never get anyone to, I could kind of like build the business case, incredible presentation, run a test market, but nobody within any of the business units wanted to take this business on because it had nothing to, it was just too risky and too
Mm.
weird and too different from their
Mm.
existing business model.
Yes.
So I kind of got worn out of
Yeah.
pitching that, nobody could say yes to it, nobody could say no to it. And I was like, man, who's making the decisions here?
Yeah.
I had taken it all the way up to the top. Like
Yeah.
I'd presented to the CEO and the president of the company, which back then is a big deal right out of business school.
Huge.
Yeah, it was huge. And actually the people across the table, the CEO and the president, they both had been in the marketing department and they had been
Mm.
brand managers,
Mhm.
and had a mentor who was like the worldwide VP of marketing for Johnson's Baby, which is just like an incredible brand. And he said, if you want to be in marketing, okay, if you want to, which I didn't even care about marketing. I was just
Yeah,
like, I
right.
want to make good decisions that have a positive impact on the world.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to get leverage here, like
Tell me where to go.
and
And
power.
I'm there. Yeah, I'm there. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted power and authority to do good work,
Sure.
right? Like,
Sure.
superheroes are very powerful. They save the
Sure.
world, but they got to
Yeah.
have some power.
Yeah.
So he said to me, okay, look, you have to go into brand management and there's no shortcuts. Like you got to start at the bottom and work your way up.
Okay.
Okay. So he's like, I'll pull some strings. I'll get you a job in the marketing department, which was a really big deal. Okay.
Yeah.
Because getting those like brand manager jobs in places like Procter and Gamble or J&J, they are highly coveted,
Yes.
highly competitive. If
Yeah.
I just come in through the normal path, I never would have made the cut because it's people who are like really serious about marketing,
Sure. Yeah.
So I'll never forget, he calls me up. He's like, hey, okay, I've got a great gig for you. It's like junior brand manager, on like one of our most profitable, biggest brands.
Great. What was it?
Okay.
You're like, okay, thanks.
It's so bad when I tell you what it was. Okay.
Say it.
I don't even know if you know what it is because you're British, right? But it's this brand called Monistat.
I mean, I'm South African. I only came
That's
to
right. I know you
England.
are.
Yes. Yes, but I
That's
mean,
right. That's right.
I've never heard of it, but very big, obviously, in America.
Okay.
What is
It's
it?
in the personal care.
Okay.
It's in the personal care category. Okay.
Right.
It is a medicine for yeast infections.
Okay. Cool. And yes, I can see you there now in that category.
I mean,
Okay,
I think my
listen.
first big.
Tell me what you do because I love this. I think this is quite
Okay,
an
I'm
untold
getting to the big
story.
break.
Yeah, please, yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting to the big break. Okay,
Love
so
it.
I think my first big project was like a, habits and practices study of like vaginal care, basically.
Right.
And that was fascinating. But I was just like so embarrassed to be working on this brand, okay, because it's like not anything that anybody wants to talk about. I
Yeah.
had gone from doing this thing that was like really my dream,
Yeah.
sustainability, emerging markets, to working on this thing. But the closest leap that I could make was onto this brand called KY. And I really wanted to get on KY, okay, because I had an incredible marketing director. And they had just had this insight about how to reposition the brand as something that's not like a problem solution brand, but that's more about intimacy enhancement. And it was so insight driven and so fun, okay, because it was like, this is a product that will bring you closer to your partner. This is not a product that's about vaginal dryness.
Yeah.
So anyway, I did, which nobody wants to talk about anyway. I mean, I did a lot of like focus groups talking to women about their sex lives, lots of the stuff.
Yeah.
It was really super, super fun.
Fascinating. Yeah.
So yeah, and that was a huge success. Okay, this is when I kind of was like, wow, you can have this brand had been around since 1917, KY, had 65% market share. It was doing 30 million in revenue. By the time I rolled off the brand, we were doing 110 million in revenue.
Yeah.
Right before I went out on my maternity leave, I sold in a forecast of 80 million. So it was like 30 to 65.
60.
This is in the space of like 2 or 3 years.
Amazing.
We doubled the brand in the space of, it was crazy cool and so fun. Because the marketing was, just everything came together, the marketing, the distribution. I mean, at one point, we were selling so fast and we were on air with TV. And I remember one of the ingredients in the product was honey. So we launched this project called KY Warming.
Oh, nice.
And had the thing that made it, that was the thing. It was like, this was what proves that it's about, fun and intimacy enhancement and not a problem.
Yeah.
Had a little bit of like pepper, like cayenne and honey in it. That's how it made the warming thing. And the honey truck tipped over on the way to the factory, and we had out of stocks in all the stores, and we had to turn the TV off. One of my favorite. Like, wait, what? The honey truck tipped over? Like,
I kind of love it in a way. You know what I mean? I think that people don't realize that you have to take these things and kind of roll with it a little bit. You know what I mean? As it happens. And you know I love even more about this story is that, and especially for this pod, it's saying your career path doesn't have to follow a traditional route at all. And it's almost like, it's a bit what I talk about all the time as an outsider in corporate and in these places. It's same with me. If I hadn't been headhunted to go in-house at Adidas and Diageo, I don't think I would have passed the application because I didn't have schooling, the contacts, whatever. And this outsider mentality is really interesting because it can come in and look at a product and look at a brand in a really different way like you did with this. And obviously the marketing director, whoever your boss was, of course, is open to that as well, which is really important. So all these like elements really sound like they came together. So I laugh and I smile just because I think I can see such a lovely outtake for whoever's listening who may be in a situation where they're like, oh my God, I'm working on this really awful thing. It's not something I want to do, but you can take something and make it a thing, right?
Yeah, you have to, because this was not, I mean, this was a big break for me, okay? And it required me to, we have this expression, which is, I don't know if you guys have it too in South Africa, but it's called eat crow, It's like, eat crow is like, it's maybe a little bit like eat humble pie, you know what I mean? Like,
eat crow, okay.
Yeah, and so for sure, like if you think about we're gonna get to how I got to work on cool stuff, okay? But like I was undercover, you know what I mean? I was like, I was showing up just like every other brand manager. Back then we had to wear, it was a rule that you had to wear pantyhose, and you couldn't wear you couldn't have bare legs. Right. It was like so corporate. So I just was learning so much. Okay, so I did that. I went on maternity leave. I got recruited to go to Coca-Cola. I went to Atlanta. That was like closer to my family and all that stuff. And then I got the opportunity to go to Zurich to work on a global business in Zurich, which was incredible. I worked in this joint venture between Coca-Cola and Nestle. And while I was there, I got a call from a headhunter, this guy named Michael Lemming. Michael Lemming ran stealth recruiting for Nike. Okay, he was he was a legend, extremely cool individual. He had this business card that was like all black. It looked like it didn't have anything on it. You kind of had to hold it up to the
Yes.
light to see what it said. And his title was like head of stealth recruiting,
Amazing.
I mean, you know what,
Yes,
you know
I
what
do.
you know what recruiting is like it's like,
Yeah.
so anyway, I'll never forget. I was like in the airport in Madrid, I had my little BlackBerry Pearl, I
Yes.
get a call from Michael Lemming and he's like, hey, we have a role on this brand called Converse. It's based in Boston. We really like to fly you out and
Wow.
see if you're a fit for the role.
Right.
And the reason that I got that job, okay, is because I had been, two reasons. First of all, I had been playing it straight. Okay. There was a very creative CMO, Jeff Cottrell, who who's a
Yes.
legend. He, I used to joke that like my entire job description could fit on a Post-it note, and it was like, shit, Jeff doesn't want to do.
Actually, that's a perfect job. That's a perfect job. You need a really, really easy remit like that. That's the way to do it because it's wide. I love that. That's amazing.
He was
Yeah.
just he was so creative, and he needed someone who was very commercial and very strategic, which of course I was, right? I've been
Yeah.
owning the P&L at Coke and at J&J, right? So I had the financial side really dialed in, and he needed someone who could do that, which I could. But actually, the reason he hired me is because I had been in a band.
Music.
Okay? And he knew that
Absolutely.
he knew I could do the business stuff
Yes.
without alienating the cool kids. And
Yes.
anybody else who could do all that uptight stuff, right, would just piss off all the creative and cool kids, So that's basically that was a really big break for me. That was like VP of marketing for North America. And then I was able to take over the Chuck Taylor brand globally. That was just like an incredible break. And I would say my career has been a lot of that. It's been a lot of like eating humble pie, learning the ropes, paying my dues, and then boom, I get a call and wow, okay, yeah, I can do that.
It's amazing because I love that idea of, and I call this a translation service actually. So what I do, feel the same way, I can do the commercial side and the creative side and the cultural side, and that translation service between corporate, even the briefs or kind of objectives of corporate, what they need to do from a business growth point of view, and how to translate that into a cultural, even brief and or activation, but then also culturally, how to then mutually benefit that into corporate as well. I mean, it's a really specific thing that can be done. So I can absolutely see how that must have been incredible for Converse, which it was, and we know that, but also for you to be able to have this kind of really sort of spectrum of an offer that works so well together. And I think that brand, I mean, I'm a huge fan anyway, but that brand I think has done really well in that, and exactly that music, creativity, cultural. It's not feeling like it's a huge corporate brand still, and I think that's probably a handprint from you, I'm sure, and a bit of a blueprint from you that still runs through the
Oh,
brand today. But brilliant. Well, I feel like this gets me onto my next area around this intersection of self and work, actually, which I think is
it
exactly
sure
what you're
does.
talking. Yeah, what you're talking about here, and I feel like with you, that's kind of happened. Even if it's been sideways, there's still this real self of who you are, and I've seen that in everything that you've done. Have you ever faced situations where you had to choose between a personal belief and a professional expectation? How did you navigate that? Are there any examples?
You kind of do. I think you kind of do all the time, your whole career, right? Because, we work in a capitalist society. We both do. And a lot of times what you need to do within a company is not set by your, values at all. It's set by the terms of the market. And actually a lot of what happens in the market, especially once you get into the venture-backed space, is it's like fads and fashions, but with VCs,
Yes.
like what are VCs into? And so I would say, there's definitely been a time when I failed to do that
Yeah.
and had to leave a very lucrative and high profile role because I just could not make peace with the with what was required of the work and how
Yes.
that work, how that didn't work with my own values.
Yes.
And, I think it's okay to, I think it's okay to talk about it a little bit now without giving anything away, but
Oh.
especially now, I mean, it was very sensitive at the time, and it was when I was at Lyft, I really thought Lyft could be a better angel in the rideshare world. That's really why I joined the company.
Yeah.
And what I didn't understand at the time was just how predatory the gig economy actually is. That business model can just be, it's just like you open it up and you peer into, the precarity of so much of the working class in America. And you realize like, wow, okay, we are just profiteering off of this
Right.
precarity. That ate me alive. I couldn't do it. I got them through the IPO. I definitely owe them that, and we had a great IPO event. But from the moment we got through that milestone, I was like, I can't do it. I just cannot do it. So I think that's the one time where I was like, this is too hard, So I definitely have a line that I can't cross. But I think, anytime you're, unfortunately, a lot of times I'm coming into a situation that is pre-IPO. The company's had a lot of free money. They've done a lot of reckless hiring. I have to be the person that comes in and says, okay, guys, it's actually hard to get anything done here because we have too many people involved, Yeah.
Yes.
And so it's always extremely hard, because anytime you have to let go of someone, especially for financial reasons, it's devastating for them personally.
It's tough. Yeah. So can we talk about adversity? And if there was any way that you could share like a personal challenge or failure that actually shaped your creativity or your resilience or something that you learned something from, because I'm a believer in like, you never fail, you always win or learn, right? So was there anything that so, profoundly shifted something for you? Any examples of that?
I'll give you one example that was really transformative for me because I think like with any person one of my strengths is that I'm very, once I have a vision and see what we can achieve, it's very difficult to dissuade me from actually achieving it.
You're there. Yeah. I hear you. Yep.
We're going to get it done,
Done, yes.
And that's a superpower. My team, like we charge through, we get it done. But I had this one time, I've worked with a lot of founders actually, and that is always a very interesting experience. But the founder of Patagonia, he is this very kind of grumpy, curmudgeonly, but very real deal kind of guy.
Yeah,
okay. Yeah. And when I worked on the strategy there, which has been very transformative for them, one of the ideas that was very core to the strategy was, look, because at the time when I went, they had thought their problem was that they were like not hardcore enough. Okay. So they were just like, oh, if we could just have more badass athletes, climb higher mountains. And it was like all the marketing was just indistinguishable from Arc'teryx and North Face, whatever. They were like obsessing over these little tiny differences, that nobody could tell.
Yeah.
And so I said, hey, what's cool about our athletes is actually the fact that they're activists. Okay. And this idea of being a dirtbag activist, right? Someone who just lives for the sport, but is also an activist. Like that's what we need to be talking about. Yes. We need to send them on these adventures, not for these feats of athleticism, which of course they can all do, but in order to save that place where they're doing their sport. Okay? Amazing. And so the target idea was the dirtbag activist. Well, first of all, Yvonne hates anything that sounds like marketing. Okay. That's, personas or target market or whatever, it's just like, it just grossed him out. Okay. Yes. And so, but to me, this concept of the dirtbag activist was like, this is exactly what we're doing. We need to be very specific. So all over the world, everybody working for the company gets it. And he was like, it was like nails on a chalkboard to him. Okay. Because first of all, what he said was, there's hardly any real dirtbags left. Okay. Look, I was a real dirtbag. Everybody else is a poser. They're all faking it. What they're doing is not real. So you can't just call somebody that, you know, it's like, you got to really live all about this stuff. You got to live it. Right. And so he could not stand it. It drove him crazy. And so I was like, but this is it. This is what we're going to do. It's going to work, And finally he was like, if you I never want to hear you say it again, Joy. You are forbidden. Okay. You are banned from saying it. Like, I pushed him really hard. And I was like, oh, I don't know how I'm gonna, like, how we're gonna be successful if we can't, like, have this target. And eventually that's not why I left. Eventually I went to Sonos. I stopped using the word. I accepted his, edict. Of course, he owns the company.
Yeah.
And actually, you know what? They just did it. Like, they kept on doing it. We just did it. We just dropped the word.
Without putting it into a box like that, because it makes sense.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's like, you shouldn't cut off your nose to spite your face, because the sentiment is there. Even if the word, it doesn't matter. It's not about the word out there in a way. It's about the belief in what it is. It's so interesting.
So we just did it. They kept on doing it. Hugely successful.
Yeah, hugely successful. Yeah.
And I had this, the metaphor for me is like, it's a little bit like Bruce Lee talks about, be like water. It's like when you hit that rock, you got to be like water. Water just flows around the rock, And I use that metaphor visually for myself a lot. It's like, oh yeah, we're going there. This is just the rock.
How are we going to do it? Yes. And my mum tells me that all the time, because for a long time I hit the rock. I hit it, and I was like, what are you talking about? And she was like, you will still be able to do what you want to do if you can navigate your way around it and do what you want to do, as opposed to this. She's like, you're never going to get anywhere doing that. You know what I mean? And I learned that. And so, same as you. So now I try really hard to go, okay, how do I get that person to either understand or, in a way, sometimes apologize later? But not that you need to do that a bit. But, I mean, I totally get dirtbag activism. And for me, I think that's the right way to do it, because it's so generic, these categories. Like, what is the thing that only your product or brand can do? What is the thing? And whether you call it a segmentation or whether you call it a strapline, whatever it is, you can still live that way and be that way. And that's what makes great brands. I'm telling you. I mean, it out of everyone.
I'm going to tell you. I got to tell you an example of that. Okay, so we did a big segmentation at Converse. There was like 4 segments, whatever. I think one of them was like, the core creative or something.
Yeah.
And when I was at Patagonia, I got a call. I think it may have been from Doug Palladini, the guy that ran Vans for a long time, because he was recruiting a CMO or VP of marketing or something. And he was like, oh, we just did this incredibly brilliant segmentation, and the core, the target is the creative core.
Yeah. And you're like, okay.
I was like, guess what? It's like the same target as your number one competitor.
Yes. Yes.
So differentiating.
Yeah, totally. I see it all the time. I'm like, wow, okay. And it's amazing. The same words, the same everything. I'm like, that's all well and good, but how is your brand making sense for this person? Or why would they care, to be honest? You really have to unlock the thing that only this brand can do. I honestly believe that. I just feel like you'd want to do that as well, because then you can do fun things, right, as well. That break the formula. Joy, the formula kills me. I can't. Another sneaker drop that looks the same, another luxury cafe that looks, I'm like, can anyone see that these all look the same?
It's, I don't know, I'm sure you've probably read Doug Holt, right? And some of his writings about cultural strategy, And I feel like that's what he calls the category orthodoxy. And it is so, when you're inside of it, you sometimes you're like a fish in water and you can't see it.
Yeah.
And then, like, I think that was the case for Patagonia. When I said, hey, look, everybody's got a formula, okay? It's like handsome athlete in a jacket with a technical name on it. Send them on an adventure. Tell a story that it's that technical thing you made up that you put in the thing that allowed them to survive, like lather, rinse, repeat. You know what I mean?
I love that, because I'm such a vocal champion of the formula crack. And it's also interesting as a storyteller, as a marketer, communicator, you want to do something that's interesting, right? Why would you want to do something that looks and is packaged differently, but you could replace that logo with anything.
It just disappears.
It disappears. Yeah.
I have a lot of old, like, dumb marketing jokes that probably nobody gets, because I've been in the business for so long, like you.
Same. Yeah.
But like, one of my favorites is like, what is the quietest $3 billion that's ever been spent in marketing? And the answer is like the Microsoft marketing budget, right?
Sure.
Because it's just like, they spend like, you see these companies, they spend $5 billion, you're like, on what? I've never even noticed a single thing that they've done, because it literally wallpaper, it just fades into the background.
I know, it's amazing that. And I think that comes down to as well, the status quo around what successful looks like, what objectives are, what measurements are. And it just seems like, especially for things that are different, placing a value against that, is hard to do until afterwards. And this is always the thing. That's why you need this kind of, they call it, and the amount of times I've heard about a brand wanting to be brave. I want to be a brave brand. I'm like, really? Let's test that theory.
Put it to the test.
See if we can test what brave means to you versus, it's interesting because I think people do somehow want that. But then when they come down to the final idea that may feel really different for them, there's a nervousness that happens around there. And it's leadership like yourself and obviously your bosses and definitely some of mine who really gave me cover to be able to do that. But they few and far between. They're few and far between.
Few and far between.
They are.
And I get it why people say bravery, because it is very scary.
It's like, it's supposed to be.
It's supposed to be. And it's like you kind of have to get used to that. It's like anything worth doing is going to come with a fair amount of risk, and it really is like, if you have that nervous Nelly of a boss, it's the worst situation you can be in if you really want to do great creative work,
it's
because
tough.
It's pretty scary. And
it is.
And I think I have a lot of times where I'm like, I'm very kind of like instinctive on the work, and
same.
And that's why I'm like, don't show me anything you're not willing to do.
Yeah, totally. No, that's right. That's right. But also there's a bit of a and this is what I find really hard to explain to people. And my mum said I've always had this. I have this intangible ability to understand what's going to resonate. Now,
same.
And I know that you know that. And I'm saying that because I know that you get what that means. And it's a weird... It's not like I can go, it's this plus this plus this and codified. It's not like that. It's just an ability to understand, because I take in so much information all the time that I can go, okay, this is really important. I don't know. I don't even know how it calculates in my brain. You know what I mean?
I think it's also that you've always been immersed in culture. Like you've never, shut yourself off into the endless conference room kind of world.
No.
And it's like, if you live this world of rarefied air where you're just like, especially in the States, it's so gross, right? It's like car to the conference room, to the airport, to the car, to the conference room. It's like, what do you know about the world? What people are, care about? You got to feel it.
Yeah, and I think that was interesting because I asked someone a while ago just, to identify like when they thought about my company and the work that I've done, and they were like real world insights. And it was really great to hear that, actually, real world insights. And I love it because it's so right for how I see the world, but I didn't really think that anyone else saw that actually. But anyway, thank you. That's good to know. But I also know that you understand this weird intangible thing. I don't know. Maybe one day we can bottle it up together and sell it off. That'd be great.
Sell it. Well, I'm pretty sure you're selling it every day, babe.
We are, exactly. I know. Can you share a lived experience that you've ever had that this kind of like outsider mentality or different way of thinking actually gave a really big advantage to a problem that needed to be solved at one of your jobs, projects, careers? Or created an opportunity for the brand? I mean, I think we kind of covered it a little bit with the KY stuff. KY stuff in the beginning, because that felt like it was different ways of thinking that made that actually a different issue and created an opportunity around that. Was there anything else later on that jumps to mind?
I mean, there's so many examples. I'll give you one from Sonos, but even a bigger one right now. Okay. So Sonos, was very like like the most differentiating customer targets are the ones that like nobody else could have. Okay. And one of the things that we found when I first started working on Sonos is like everybody that was into Sonos was the same, and we called them Wistimals. Okay,
Ooh, what does that stand for?
wealthy, settled, male, techie music lovers.
Lovely. Is music lovers and 2 words or 1 word?
I don't know. Maybe. But anyway, they were all the same, and that's all they could sell to. And that's because they were like very focused on, you know, the purity of the sound and all the marketing. I used to make fun of it and call it like music, hooray, you know?
Music, hooray. Amazing. I love that. Hooray.
But I think like, you know, just not being in that world, that's not who I was, you know? And so I had to find something different. And it was like, the insight and the revelation, they're still doing it, you know?
Yeah.
It was so profound because it was like, okay, let's listen to people, you know, what happens when they get Sonos. And it was like, oh, wow, it's about the family and the home and what we would call now the vibe shift that happens in the home, you know, when you're all listening to music together. And like, think about how you feel in your home when someone turns music on. It's like, you know, so we did this big survey, you know, study where we did like music deprivation and then we did homes that had music. And the stats were incredible. You know, people spent more, you know, time together in the same room. They told each other they loved each other more. Like kids were less irritable about doing chores. It was just like so many incredible insights.
Amazing.
And I just think stepping outside, like I wasn't from the tech world, you know. I definitely had a background in music and I understood all of music production, but I knew enough about it to know it's like, again, rarefied air, you know. How do people actually experience music? So I think that would be one, but probably the biggest one for me now, and it is because I'm working for this company that is such an outsider brand, okay? It's a big brand in France, but not as well known in the rest of the world. And, you know, I have the incredible CEO and founder who has the most insane risk appetites. But he's a founder, you know, he built a multi-billion-dollar company. Of course he does.
But he's a founder. And that's a difference. There's a big, big difference. I totally agree.
Big difference. A huge difference. Like Tim Cook is no Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
But anyway, so he, you know, he said to me early on, you know, like, you really need to focus on older models. Okay. That's what people are buying. Like they're buying like the iPhone from 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. And, you know, the idea just popped into my head of like, oh, wow, you know, I'm constantly being harassed to upgrade. So what we need to just tell everybody to downgrade, you know, that's it.
Yeah. Simple.
Just like that.
Simple.
And I think because I do come from this very weird background, like you would normally not even tell your creative director that, right? You'd be like, oh, I have to write a brief.
Yeah, a whole thing.
You know?
Oh, yes.
And he's so amazing, you know, I just was like, hey, I think the idea is just downgrade now, you know? And he made it so amazing. Like he took it so far and now, you know, it's like gone viral and all this other stuff. It's just, you know, which of course you can't do that by trying to do it. You know, you just have to make work that's like really so useful and extraordinary. People are like, wow, let's share it. But that's probably another one.
But I think that for me is exactly what I'm trying to say about knowing what resonates. That is exactly an example for me. Usually comes to me in the shower. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh my God, that's what it is. And usually it's one line and going, that's what it is. And then you build from there. But then you don't want to get too complex too. You got to keep
That's
it.
Exactly right.
Yeah,
you got to keep it pure.
You got to keep it super pure and super simple and super relatable for people. You know what I mean? Like, that's real world. Like that's it. Because I think what happens within our industry is that our industry claps for each other in the industry. I'm like, you know when it's working is when your audience is telling you it's working because they're buying the thing or they're doing whatever you're asking them to do. That for me is where I see success is if we've decided who we want to talk to, what we want to say to them, and that's happening and working. Like that for me feels like like
Okay,
a
I
way
got
to
to give
measure
you two.
things.
I'm going to give you two metaphors on that because the
Yes,
creative
please.
development part is really important.
Mm,
So you were asking me about like, we were talking about like hitting an obstacle and
yeah,
like,
yeah,
how do I have
mm,
resilience and stuff like that?
yeah,
And it's this whole idea of going around. So I've always, been a bicycle commuter. Obviously for years I had my kid on the
yes.
back of the bike.
Hmm.
And I used to go through this little thing, which is like a very tight squeeze. And of course, you have your child on the back, you're not
Yeah.
going to like
No,
do things too crazy, you know
crazy.
what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So I'd always have to kind of like get off the seat and sort of like walk the bike
yeah,
through,
yeah.
And one day I just happened to be coming from a different angle. And I just sailed through that little clutch, right? Just it's because I hit it from a different angle.
Wow. That's such
That's
a
another
good,
good metaphor
yeah,
about
that's
when you kind
great.
of like hit obstacles.
Hmm.
But this thing about like you have a pure idea, okay, and you land it like coherently.
Hmm.
To me, it's a little bit like if you're gonna like hop a curb, like if you're really, or let's say you're gonna bike over a
Hmm.
curb,
Hmm.
if you're cautious and like nervous, you're just gonna fall
You
off. Like you gotta
literally
like,
gonna fall off. Yeah, it's gonna
you,
go.
you gotta.
You just gotta hit it. That's it. I love that. I might
So
use
I think
that
about
next
that a
time, but
lot
it's
too.
true. But it's true.
Yeah.
And sometimes, I have seen briefs that are so complex. I'm like, I call this translation service. I'm like, what is this brief trying to say and do? There's so much complexity around that. And sometimes it just needs to be completely simplified, completely pulled out. And I think briefs within corporate agencies, culture, what have you, have a lot to answer for the stuff that we see. Don't
Me
you
too.
think?
I think the
I
best
really
ones are
do.
super short and
Super short.
super
Yeah.
short,
Yeah.
and we just had I'll give you an example of that recently that we just had because when Trump announced the tariffs,
Hmm.
we decided to do it was like 10% universal tariffs,
Yep.
right? So we decided to do like a recession special, 10% off everything with the promo code Elon.
Oh, amazing.
Okay, that was basically the idea
Yeah.
pitched to me by somebody on the team who probably didn't even realize what a great idea was.
Yeah.
I was like, we're doing it,
Yes.
Then there were all these like, well, 10% is really big, like for us, because we're a
Yeah.
marketplace,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
are we gonna make
Mm,
any money
mm,
on this,
mm,
Oh, but it's not really a recession yet, so
mm,
let's call it a pre-recession
mm,
special, And like, well, Elon doesn't really have anything to do with the tariffs,
mm,
so is that the right promo? And it's
mm.
like all, at one point it came back, it was like pre-recession special, $20 off,
Yeah.
promo code,
Became a
fuck tariffs
different.
or something.
Yeah. You're like, okay, we're done. We're past the point. We're past the point of the news story. It's over.
Like, yeah. And actually that's important. Like,
Yeah.
I think the wisdom, the benefit of experience is so great
Yeah,
because,
it really is.
it's like, hey, babe, very well intentioned that technically we're not in a recession. Technically Elon has nothing
Yeah.
to do with it. It's the vibe we're going for here. It's just the vibe.
It's just the
Don't overthink it.
Don't overthink it. And yeah. And I wonder though, I think, and let's talk about this because I think this is extremely important. As a leader, we need more leaders like yourself in these spaces, right? And even more at a bigger corporate level, because I know back market is big, but still founder based. So that's important. How have your experiences shaped the way you lead and connect with your teams and others? Sideways or even upwards?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's important, especially if you're working in a big global business, right? I think it's very important to have had experience in a market where you're like on the receiving end of what the global team is doing, and then also have had the global role. So you just have empathy with people kind of up and down the line and across. But I have to go back to Jeff. Like I really learned so much from him. And one of the things that he did was he did not let me get involved in the creative at all, right? Because even though he knew I was kind of like cool enough to be in the room, he was like, I don't know if you really know what you're doing, But right? You have a cool background, but you've only ever worked for like incredibly nerdy brands.
Yeah,
so
right.
I'm not going to let you touch the creative.
Yeah.
I'm going to let you touch the creative. I'm not going to even care what your point of view is, And it was frustrating because of course everybody wants to be involved in that. But I learned so much from being told like just shut up, just sit there and pay attention and watch us work and learn what you can learn. And I know it's frustrating for people who are really driven and ambitious to say, okay, you don't get a say in this, like, and so I think that's a part of my leadership style that allows me to do great work with teams, but it's hard, okay? Because I will say, like, you know what? I know you think you're good at this, but you're not going to get a say in it, okay?
Yeah.
Because this person is on the hook for it. They're, I'm going to go with their idea.
Yeah.
So I'm not afraid to do stuff like that. I think it's super, super important. But I would say two things about kind of like my leadership style that has been the same forever. Because I think people can work on some of their issues, right? But we are who we are, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm very challenging. And I think, I have very high expectations.
Same.
But I'm also, this is going to sound weird, I'm very loving. Like I
hope I am too. I know what you mean. I hear you. Tell me what you think the role of empathy is in how you build relationships and foster collaboration. Because empathy is an interesting word. I know we talked about like being loving and kind. Is that the same thing as empathy?
No. It's interesting too, because, there's a whole kind of like campaign against empathy these days, which I find to be utterly shocking. But
I mean, that's weird. Why would that be?
It's really weird. I think it's because of Elon Musk's popularity. You know what I mean? He's on this sort of like rampage against empathy. He thinks it's like, and so does JD Vance, but that's very wrong.
I mean, and I was going to say two, incredibly inspiring people. So, it's fine. So tell me about empathy and the role of empathy for you.
I mean, honestly, I think for me, it's a lot of, it's just kind of like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes,
Sure.
And it's like, okay, if you've never been a CFO, it's hard, because but I've done almost every job in the marketing universe, so I know how it feels to, be told to PR something that's not PRable, or to be given a brief that's like 50 pages long, things like that. So I think a lot of it's just like putting yourself in somebody else's shoes, but also a big thing is like, why is someone behaving in the way that they are?
Sure.
You know what I mean? Like try to get it, like what's the underlying, cause? And I do think that like, this has changed a lot about me as I've gotten older too. And that is caring a lot more about what is going on with other people. I've been so focused on the work, and I tend to be very focused on the work. And I think a lot of, I think especially a lot of women or other, kind of like people who've been historically marginalized in these spaces, you want to think like, man, could we just talk about the numbers? Could we just look at the results? And you realize over time, it's so many other things, it's how you make people feel in the room, like, and so I just pay a lot more attention to that. So I think empathy is honestly just caring about other people's feelings, trying to put them, put yourself in their shoes, and then sometimes you really can't over rotate on it either. You just have to do the hard thing.
And I think it's hard because I'm very, I mean, as you speak, the similarities are crazy. I was always about, the work for me always felt like it wasn't so much the journey, but the output. But now, as I'm getting older and I've always cared about people, right? So it's not really been about that. I think there's just where the focus lies for specific things, and especially in moments of stress and moments of deadlines and all moments of execution. That's always hard. And I'm really, really trying as well to take a step back always and just consider the other person. But sometimes I want to make sure that it's done in a way that feels, what's the word, where you are just letting people get away with stuff either. I want that expectation to be there. So finding that balance between empathy, but also pushing someone forward, because sometimes it can feel difficult to do that. So I'm trying really hard to find that balance.
It's a little bit of a cliche, the radical candor kind of concept. But it's so easy to spot the opposite of it, which is like ruinous empathy,
Yeah.
And I see it so much. I still can't believe, like, I'm like a grown man, shying away from a conversation that is like, come on, it's not that hard. But it's shocking how conflict avoidant so many people are, and it can really be a downfall.
I think so.
If you let something go unaddressed because you don't want to have the conversation, ultimately you're accountable for what's happening. You need to really figure out how to face these things. And one of the things I learned a long time ago is, spending time preparing for conversations. It seems so dumb, but anytime there's a lot of heat in something, you tend to go in, you're like, I'm going to tell this person this. It's
sure.
like, whoa.
Yeah.
What I mean?
Yep.
I get that with my daughter. I have a teenage daughter. I'm like, okay, you got to be strategic. Okay.
Yeah.
What are you trying to achieve? What is the outcome that you want here?
I've got a 14-year-old, and I hear you, I get you. It's very strategic. So, and I think maybe, I wonder if that's actually been, having a child for me, really did change things for me, honestly. It made me definitely more empathetic. It taught me and teaches me so much about listening. Like, it's all the things. So I really appreciate that. Hardest thing I've ever done. Best thing I've ever done. But I'm hoping that I bring some of that patience that I've had to learn, actually, in quite a big way, into what I'm doing now. So I think, for me at least, it's a learning situation when it comes to empathy. But I think every time I've approached something in that way, the results speak for themselves. The output and the outcome is amazing, and so it's just something that I think should be something we look to leaders for and with, going forward, especially in the world that we're in. It's crucial.
I totally agree. And also for our customers,
And
it's
also
like,
for our customers, yes.
I think probably pretty much since I went to Patagonia, I've been selling to what I kind of disparagingly call the Whole Foods demographic, right? So if you think about like Sonos, Patagonia, Lyft, this is like the upper 30% of the, socioeconomic strata. And one of the things I really love about my current role is like, I'm selling something to people who are worried about money.
Yes.
Okay? Like, they're worried about their finances. And it's so exciting to me to think about, okay, how do you, how do you talk to someone in that space and in a way that is intelligent and empathetic and entertaining?
Sure. It doesn't have to be, and I keep on saying about work that's culturally relevant, doesn't have to be worthy to push things forward. It can be meaningful, but doesn't have to always be worthy. And I think this whole idea, and I talk about it in my book, I'm like, the words purpose marketing for me are weird words together. Marketing is one thing, purpose is one thing. I'm like, what? Whereas I feel like something that's meaningful and impactful in your life doesn't always have to be worthy. It can be, exactly what you're doing with back market, actually, and I think that's what you're saying as well. It's not preachy. It's not, sad. It's just going, here is a way that's relatable for you, that's entertaining, but actually is going to, we've thought about what your biggest challenge is, and this is a way that can be addressed. So I hear you, and I feel like it is difficult sometimes within these spaces. There's such a, it's like either you're purposeful or you're this. And I'm feeling like there could be a way to do profit without killing everything, and purposeful or meaningful. And it doesn't have to be so extreme. And in fact, where these come together, I call it convergent communications, where you have this sort of, corporate, what used to be called corporate social responsibility, or corporate responsibility with consumer facing ways of doing things. And I think this is what I love about back market. And in fact, a lot of the work that you've done kind of, for me, feel that way. But that's probably because of your personal values exude. I think that's what I enjoy about your work specifically. Tell me about how you help others leverage their own unique perspectives, especially if they come from outside. Any success stories around that? How do you leverage that?
I mean, this is why you have to watch that Pharrell video, by the way.
I will.
Okay, because this is what he's doing. It's like he's dealing. Maggie Rogers is very young. She's very anxious about obviously sharing stuff with Pharrell. and he just listens and he spots the brilliance in her. And to me, that's a big part of what I'm doing. Like my greatest achievement always over and over again is like spotting someone who's lacking confidence or who's beaten down and demoralized, and like finding their, you know, particular genius and like amplifying it, you know, giving it space to really bloom. And so a lot of that is just, you know, just watching people and also listening to them, you know, talk about what gives them energy, and or even also like listening to what people complain about, you know, like people do a lot of complaining in offices and in businesses, you know, and I'm like, oh, you don't like that? Okay, guess what? You get to fix it, you know?
Well, yeah, you, hooray.
Knock yourself out, man. You know, like, have at it.
Love that. Love that. That's amazing. But yeah, I think it's listening, isn't it? And I think that people appreciate it, and you see it in sort of like, you know, people who have talent, and this is, I guess, what used to really frustrate me coming from South Africa. I know so many people from our community who are talented, but will never have the access, just because politically we just don't have that, or, you know, socially, or whatever it might be. These talented people, and that raw talent for me is, I don't know, I love spotting that, and I love, if I can open that door, I'm gonna open that gate for sure.
Me too.
You know what I mean?
Always
like,
have my eye out for that.
Always. And that's something that's really, really important to me. And I feel like at the moment there's such a big gatekeeping situation that's actually not only stopping talent from expanding and coming in, but also stopping your business. Like, surely you want to, you know, break the formula. Where do you think that kind of thinking comes from, you know? And it's it feels quite obvious to me, but and that's why I'm so vocal about this access and the opening of the gates, just because I feel like actually it's going to help your bottom line, if that's how you want to look at it. If that's how you want to look
I think that's one of the first things that's like when DeepSeek launched, you know, and there was a meme around, you know what China's not doing? Like, they're not saying, oh, you know, let's get rid of everybody who's a you know, great engineer that is woke. You know, they're not like, you know, it's like all hands on deck. And I totally agree that, you know, there's so much talent that's marginalized because they're different or they're outside. And the other thing that has surprised me too is like, you can be, you know, I think I can think very consciously about that, but it's also my own unconscious biases, you know, that we're raised with, the way that we, you know, like, are overly critical of ourselves, or, you know, demoralize ourselves with like negative self-talk, or, you know, promote someone who fits the bill, you know, because we've internalized that this kind of person is, you know, smarter or more capable. Like, I think you have to always be really vigilant around your own biases too, because we're all brought up in this culture that says, you know, this kind of person is going to be successful and this kind of person is not, and you just have to be super vigilant about it.
But that comes back to empathy. The whole thing kind of works together, doesn't it? So it's really interesting, and I feel like this is where it's so important to try from a young age. And it's something I've tried to instill with Jacob, you know, my child, is just like openness somehow. And it's hard because, you know, it's tough. Oh, being a parent, run businesses, run multi-billion-pound things, whatever. Being a mom, wow. Okay, so
you're about to hit the hardest. I hate to tell you. I mean, this is one thing nobody ever tells parents. It's like, I have, you know, I love it. I always love when I join a company, the first baby that's born, you know, and it's like, oh, it's so hard. And you don't want to say like, it's just going to get harder and harder.
Well, we just hit 14, so yes.
Well, I think with boys, you're probably at one of the hardest ages. For girls, it's definitely like 14 to, you know, 17 is so brutal. But then when you get to the other side, it's awesome. But it is really hard. And I think one of the hardest things is seeing yourself, and like, you know, your child is a combination of you and your partner, and you see so much of yourself in there, and you're like, wow, she's doing that thing that I do, which must drive people totally batty, you know?
For me, it's the loud voice, actually. I'm like, can you just like, and he's like, yeah, I get it from you. But this really weird, like, projecting loud voice that's super annoying for everyone. I don't think I'm that loud, but Yeah, I've been told. Anyway, everyone watching this who knows this will be literally like, Tova is literally on the ground over there laughing. Anyway,
So wow.
Tell me something about a project or piece of work that felt super deeply personal and reflective of your own story. Have you ever done that where there's been some kind of project, or maybe it's early majority?
Yeah, for sure it would be
Was it
that. I
that?
mean, yeah,
Yeah,
100%. It was
yeah.
so, it's weird. It's like one of the things, the first time I ever heard this phrase, which I'm about to say, was definitely at Nike, where they have this idea of living the brand, and it's really, and it's very striking because Converse is this brand that's all about punk rock
Yes.
and, rebellion. So you go to our campus and that's the vibe, and Nike is the complete opposite in many ways, So that's the first time I ever kind of like came along around that kind of concept. And then of course I've loved working in brands like that really have this whole kind of value system that you can, that actually, calls on you to be a better version of yourself, basically, but early majority was definitely that for me. And, this idea of leaning out, which is kind of, is a double play on words of like, I think a lot of us felt duped by the lean in discourse. And of course, that's now been totally discredited. You just had this Facebook whistleblower who worked for Sheryl Sandberg write this incredible book. And so it's about like not being duped by that kind of discourse, lean in feminism. But it also has this idea of like getting outside and like, So I think really kind of that idea that was behind early majority was very much where I was at in that particular moment in my life. And of course we grew through the newsletter and I wrote, most of the newsletters.
That's why it was awesome. Amazing. Yes.
I mean, it's a big part of how I landed this incredible gig that I'm in. The co-founder of Back Market who sits on the board, he got our newsletters, and he was like, my current boss was like, yeah, he said he loved how radical they were. I was like, wow. Every time I'd press send on that, I'd be like, oh my God, I'm never going to, if this company doesn't work out, I'm never going to get another job.
Exactly. Oh my God. That's my every morning. I'm like, shit, if I say I'm never going to get another job, but what can you do? But here you are.
Here I am.
It's actually the perfect job for you. It's so 100%, weird.
100%.
Yeah. Anyway, great. So that was awesome. Really, really different as well to what you were seeing out there at the time. Very forward thinking. So I think I was thinking more about something that you may have done with the brand, but actually early majority is the manifestation, I guess, of everything that you want to do. You sold it last year, right?
I did. Yeah. I sold it last summer.
That's good. Well,
yeah. Well, moving on.
But actually, I've always talked about, every single job that I've taken, every single role, every step on that career path has just been the next step from where I come from.
Exactly right. You're learning. And the thing is like, I'm so glad that I did that because otherwise it would have just been this dream. Like I never get to live, this is what I really want to do. And the learning from it was so much more powerful than any other learning I've ever had. I mean, it's like, it's just you. Okay. Yeah. Whatever's wrong, wherever in the universe of that company, it's you. It's your fault.
Hello. Welcome to my life. Welcome to my everyday.
This is your life. Yeah, absolutely. And you could just, it's incredible responsibility, but incredible learning and also very freeing. Like one of the things that I learned in that experience is like, I definitely have a mode at work where I'm feeling energized and inspired. I know it hits when I can't sleep because I'm like, I have an idea or like I'm shaping an idea, that's where that's where you want me in the world.
Pinnacle,
it's like in that space. And I had it so much there. I'm having it so much now. Of course, I definitely have times where it's like I can't sleep because I'm stressed about something terrible.
Of course.
But I'm spending a lot of time kind of getting into that space and being in that space.
I love that.
So
we're near the end. We're near the end from this amazing chat as always, and we could chat for ages. But
we could.
I just wanted to kind of get a sense from you on forward. So back and then forward. So first one is, if you could write a letter to your younger self, what would you say about the importance of staying true to your personal experiences or your personal way of being things?
I mean, I think there's two things I would say about that. One is you don't really have a choice.
It is what it is.
You can try to mold yourself, and sometimes you have to, like the whole like paying my dues phases of my career, you know what I mean? Where I just had to, I wasn't really, being like bringing my full self to work. Like nobody was really interested in my full self, you know what I mean? And I think you got to be willing to go through times like that. But the most important thing is just like really not doubting yourself and not being too hard on yourself. Like always look for the things that give you energy, that really energize you, and keep on doing that. It's interesting because I do think, I don't think it's really about following your passion, even though like I'm incredibly lucky that I'm working at this intersection of, And for sure, all the opportunities that I took that were more, authentically interesting to me have kind of led me to this place, but not all of them. I've had to do a lot of things. And so this leads to the other advice that I would give, which is to be patient. Okay. Like you're going to work for a long time unless you like have a big, windfall.
Yeah.
And so I remember I was this way too, and I must have driven people crazy. They're like, if I don't get a promotion by the end of the year, I'm out of here, man. And it's like, okay, well, so this expression my mom used to say, strike a trot. It's like, but don't do that. It's like self-sabotage, because if you're good enough to be having a conversation with me and I'm like, okay, I think you're going to have a great career. I don't just say that to everybody. You know what I mean? I really mean it when I say that. Like you're in a role where you're crushing it, and trust that if you keep on doing the work, it is going to pay off, because once you get yourself into a mindset where you're bitter or angry or negative, you become the CEO of Patagonia used to have so many crazy, awesome phrases. She would say, don't shit in the nest. I know I should probably use language like that on the podcast, but it's like, you can't do that. Like you got to be someone who brings energy to others around you. And if you can't, then step away and see if you can get in a different mindset, and bring that mindset to work. And if you can't, you got to move on,
I think
you should,
really good advice. Yeah.
I don't think you should be afraid of that. Like Kara Swisher is someone who I really like. And someone asked her like, what do you regret? She's like, I kind of regret like not quitting more things.
Wow. That's great to know. Yeah.
It's the opposite of what you usually hear, which is like, grit and determination and stick it out, and I don't think people should be afraid to move on and say, you know what, I think I'm better than this. I deserve better than this. The like output that I'm proud of versus the bullshit quota is like out of whack, Fine, move on and look for something else. But the patience is the biggest thing, because, if you are extraordinary, you're strong, you can do good work, it is going to work out.
I love that. But I also like the thing before, which is sometimes you just have to do the, not amazing things, because actually your big career shift to Converse was not because of the music, but it was because of the other thing that brought you there. And then the music almost just like gave it this other way of doing things. So without the Johnson & Johnson, P&L, blah, blah thing, where
that's
would you be
100% true.
now?
And you know what else?
Really
actually, I didn't even really get to do the cool stuff at Converse. I was still, I was like, I mean, I love the people at Foot Locker, but I was getting ready for the Foot Locker sales calls. I was going to I can't name other retailers. Foot Locker is probably one of the best ones, but I was doing a lot of that. I wasn't really even working on the cool stuff, and it wasn't until I got the Patagonia call, and I'd been watching Jeff, for 3 or 4 years, where I was like, okay, I'm ready to do it, and from then on, I really got to do it. But you're right, it's
that step.
Step by step. I think the big thing is like, one of the things that really guided me in the early days was try to give yourself more options rather than less with the next step that you take. Now, once I got to a certain phase in my career, I wasn't going to do that anymore. Okay, I was like, I'm done. I'm ready to close that door. It is what it is. I'm closing it. But I think when you're young, you just want to keep taking these opportunities that kind of like 100%. Expand your horizons. Yeah.
100%. And I say that even to, people who work for me or at at my businesses, I'm like, you've got to try. If you want to try this, you need to do it now before, you're 35 and kind of stuck in, or even later, go out there, live in another country if you can,
Yeah.
work and do this if you can, go and work. I think it's really, really important to be able to have that breadth of experiences, because it just adds value to you later on, like 1,000,000%.
A
I'm a
million
real
percent.
believer in that. I believe in that as well. So our last question: what does success look to you now? Um, was there any change from before to now in both professional and personal fulfillments? What does success mean now? Has it always been the same? Has it changed? Has it evolved?
I don't think it's ever changed,
Okay.
but I've been surprised by how hard it was to achieve.
Mhm.
So, I told you that story. And by the way, I didn't actually even start working in business at all until I was like 33,
Right,
35, right?
right,
So,
right.
you know, that's what I mean by being patient. But,
Mm.
I think I had this really like ridiculous idea when I went to business school, because I was working as an artist. You never stop working.
Yeah,
It's like, and if you have a day job, you're working a job, and then then at night you have
yeah,
rehearsals and recording
yeah.
and all that stuff. And I was like, man, if I could just get a regular job, make a living, leave the world a little bit better than I found it,
Yeah.
and that has never been the case, right?
Mm.
Because you get into companies and they want to take everything from you. They just want to extract like your heart and
Mhm.
your like
Mhm.
everything. And so I always dreamed of like I would like to have a job where I'm making a decent living, I'm leaving the world better than I found it, and I have a little bit of free time.
Sure.
You know,
Time
I have
is
time.
like,
Yeah.
whew, it
And
is a
so,
luxury for me, I tell you.
yeah, I
Wow.
mean,
Yeah.
it honestly took me coming to France where people put work into the proper perspective for me to
Mhm.
get that, right?
How
I
interesting.
still work really, really hard,
Mhm.
and I'm also expected to take a proper amount of vacation. I'm not expected to bother employees and outside of working hours or on the weekends. And those even with all the expectations as an executive, that's still very different from the US, where, I've worked at companies where it's like from the moment you wake up until the moment you go to bed, even and on the weekends you're on call,
Yeah.
you're doing stuff. So I do think it's like that the dream for me was to have a little bit more balance,
Mhm.
and then also work on something that I legitimately care about. To me, that's success. So, there's
Yeah.
been times when I've compromised and haven't done it.
Mm.
And those were good moments for me in terms of
Mhm.
the long term and
Mhm.
what I got.
Mhm.
But like the dream was always to work on something that I really care about. And I think you have to be open to how that's going to manifest, right?
Yes.
Because back market, I remember the first few times I heard about it, I'm like, what is this thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
And then the closer I got to the business, I was like, oh my God, I love this.
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
love that the impact it has on the planet. I love everything about the supply chain of
Mhm.
it. The people who refurbish these devices, some people start their business on our platform. I know I sound like someone pimping the gig economy, which I'm not. But they
It's
do hundreds
different.
of millions of
Yeah.
dollars
Yeah.
now,
Yeah.
and they're
Yeah.
they're working with their hands. This is
Yeah.
something that's gone away. It takes $3 of human labor to make an iPhone and 30 euros to refurbish one, 30
Wow.
euros of human
Yeah.
labor.
Yeah.
So it's like there's just so many wonderful things about the business that I love. So I think, that was it for me. It was the same ideal of success in the very beginning as it is now.
Amazing.
And it's really a good feeling. And of course, things change all the time. You got to be
Yeah.
ready for
Of
it.
course.
But this moment is a really good time.
Well, it's been a really good time chatting to you, that's for sure. Thank you so, so, so much. Absolutely, absolutely love this conversation. Can't wait to meet in real life.
I mean, how
Gonna be
many
Paris.
Zooms have we
It's gonna
done?
be, I know, it's gonna be Paris or
Yeah,
London pretty, pretty soon. But
for sure, for sure.
again, thank you so, so, so much. Incredible conversation.
Thank
So
you.
much
So good to
joy.
see you.
Mwah.
Ciao. Bye.
Ciao.